Okay, good morning. Nice to have you in our session. We will be presenting the ONE-WaSH national program. As you may know, the ONE-WaSH national program is one of the flagship program for Ethiopia, which coordinates different sectors, Ministry of Water, Health, Education, and including the Ministry of Finance. So we'll be having a few minutes to discuss, and from our side, Abarra Ndashau, advisor to the minister, is having a speech, and following that, we'll be having a brief Q&A from our side. We are a bit late while waiting more participants to come. We apologize for that. So now I will give the floor without further ado to Abarra Ndashau to say a few words on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamana. A very warm good morning to you all. This is Abarra from the Ministry of Water and Energy of Ethiopia, working as senior advisor to the minister. I have been in the ministry for the last 8 years, working with the ministers as advisor. Earlier before, I have been working in NGOs for more than a decade. So I'm going to have a well-structured speech and then few points to highlight, and for you to have opportunity to ask questions about what really does ONE-WaSH do mean by definition and practically on the ground, so that we will have an excellent session to have a conversation within the time slot set for us. So, good morning once again, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. We gather today at a pivotal moment at the world face emerging global public health challenges that are not abstract concerns for Ethiopia. They are daily realities experienced in our communities, healthcare facilities, and along the bank of our rivers and water streams. I wish to draw your attention to a fundamental pillars of public health that is too often overlooked in many of the sessions, in many of the learning and sharing, outcomes. A high-level discussion yet remains central to preventing future health crises: water, sanitation, and hygiene, or the abbreviated WaSH. The situation in Ethiopia reflects both our challenges and our resilience. WaSH-related diseases, that's waterborne, water-related diseases, continue to pose a significant threat to our population, exacerbated by the dual pressure of climate change and declining development finance. My insights are drawn from frontline experience at the Ministry of Water and Energy, strengthened through our collaborations at the African Union with international partners, including Sanitation and Water for All, that's a SWA secretariat based in New York, as a platform for learning and sharing together with member states, including more than 40, 50 countries. And we had this Sanitation and Water for All session last week in Madrid in Spain. Myself, my colleague, and our state minister for water supply and sanitation have been there for 2-day session with a memorial session for Katarina. Katarina, she used to be, that's a big loss in the sector. We had, many of the ministers, ex-presidents of many of the Global South and development partners, CSOs, research institute, learning and sharing organizations, financing organizations together. Just on the 22nd and 23rd of October, just a week before. Across Ethiopia, the link between water, sanitation, and disease is stark and undeniable. Diarrheal disease remains a leading cause of death among children under 5, spreading rapidly where safe water and sanitation are inadequate. Cholera outbreak recur with seasonal rains, while vector-borne disease, the vector-borne diseases such as malaria and dengue thrive in stringent water caused by irregular rainfall, poor drainage. Neglected tropical diseases, including trachoma and schistosoma, persist, propagated by inadequately hygiene and contaminated water. Each of these health challenges underscores a simple truth. access to safe water and sanitation is fundamental to human dignity and development. These challenges are intensified by external pressures. Climate change is no longer a distant threat. It's living with us, especially the Horn of Africa. And Ethiopia is a showcase for the two weather extremes of both drought and flood even. And these are the results of the climate change effect that we are facing. It is a current reality in Ethiopia. Prolonged drought forces communities to rely on distant or unsafe water sources, while intense rains and flood damage sanitation facilities, contaminate water points, and displace population, creating conditions for disease outbreaks. At the same time, reductions in development finance presents a critical constraint. Our needs grow. International support has not been kept good. As you know, we have COPs, and we are traveling around the world. I have been in Baku last year for COP29 in Azerbaijan, and thousands of heads of states, ministers, of almost all, we were there. And sessions after sessions, day in, day out. And then we remain with mottos, with themes, with thoughts, with concepts. And we are not able to sort out the issues related to communities living, especially in the global south. So building resilient WaSH systems. Every reduction in WaSH investment translates directly into preventable illness and loss of life. Despite these challenges, there is reason for being optimism through collaboration, diplomacy, and strategic actions. At the Ministry of Water and Energy, we are prioritizing climate resilient WaSH systems and strengthening domestic resource mobilizations, and looking for additional resources or available potential promising international grants is now becoming very low and unpredictable. And we had a plenary session yesterday in the auditorium. Yeah, no one is speaking confident about what's going to happen by tomorrow. And we lost our trust, we lost our confidence about what should be pledged, especially in the water and sanitation sector, which is a fundamental basic human rights. And Ethiopia as member state is a signatory for the UN Declaration of Human Rights. So now the government of Ethiopia is focus more on securing available domestic resources, including the treasury financing from the public resources. At the Ministry of Water and Energy, we are prioritizing climate resilient WaSH systems and strengthening domestic resource mobilization. Innovative solutions such as solar-powered water systems and integrated WaSH into national climate adaptation strategies demonstrates our commitments to sustainable progresses. So the issue related to usually in Ethiopia, as a country in East Africa, in the Horn of Africa, most of the water sources were supposed to be either diesel powered or grid connected. And this time around, thanks to technology, we are aggressively shifting our attention into solarization. And solar technologies is the one that we are currently focusing. Ethiopia being as the largest country, the second populous country with a total of more than 130 million population. So affordable, sustainable, environmentally friendly, and long-lasting solution where user communities, water pricing in Ethiopia is decided based on ability and willingness to pay. And water is both social good and economic good. So to strike the balance, we are shifting the diesel-powered water schemes, especially in the rural areas. Diesel this time around fuel supplies is not available, is not affordable, and is not becoming sustainable for people living in the rural Ethiopian, because most of the time the settlement pattern by itself is very dispersed, and that makes the per capita investment very high in Ethiopia. So, as a ministry, we are currently working with the African Union. We advocate for WaSH as a critical pillar of public health security, recognizing that a healthy and prosperous Africa depends on water security. Ethiopia is supposed to be the water tower of Africa, being in the Horn of Africa, and we have many more streams and river basins, 12 major river basins. We are source of water for many of the neighboring countries, including Ethiopia, Sudan and Egypt. So including Nile, contributing more than 86% of the Nile water resources, but not benefiting any single percentage of the benefit from Nile. So now some 2 months before, as you know it very well, we have inaugurated the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which will come up with green energy and hydropower energy, which will double, our national production capacity of the hydropower. And then we are extending our supplies of energy from the grid, from the hydropower to Kenya, Sudan, Djibouti. We have now connected to Tanzania. Our plan is to extend our connection to South Africa and on the way to the Middle East. So this is how Ethiopia is currently working in the context of regional cooperation and integration. So WaSH, in a link with health, climate resilient economic development, while advocating for predictable long-term financing aligned with national priorities. In terms of financing, Ethiopia had finalized the WaSH financing strategy, very comprehensively developed WaSH financing strategy, thanks to FCDO and other stakeholders. Under the coordination of the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Water and Energy, we came up with a very comprehensive high-level financing strategy available for any funding opportunities. So that's why this will enable us to drive our thought of one plan, one budget, and one reporting system, as we have been working for the last 1 decade. The emerging global public health emergency is at its core a challenge of equity and access to basic services. Pathogens do not respect borders, yet they thrive where poverty and neglect persists. Ethiopia's experience illustrates a global reality. WaSH is not peripheral, it is foundational. To overlook, it is to build healthy security on an unstable foundation. As we confront with twin threats of climate change and declining global support in terms of resourcing, we must choose a path of sustained investment, cooperation, and resilience. Let's leave this gathering with renewed commitment to ensure that every Ethiopia and indeed every person in the world has access to safe water and sanitation. This is not only a moral imperative, but also one of the wisest investment we can make in our collaborative health and security. Thanks to you for your attention. Any point, any question you have, it is most welcome. Just before that, some points I want to add to your area of reflection or clarification or question is that we have currently had a revised version of the National Water Policy after 25 years of service. And this revised version of new policy had passed through a long, consultative processes, bringing together different stakeholders of CSOs, development partners, regional water bureaus, members of the standing committee in the national parliament, and different ministries and development partners all together. Now it is in the hand of the Ministry of Planning and Development for them to be able to do the policy alignment with other sectors. As was earlier said by Tamana, the ONE-WaSH national program is a thought and a concept of having one plan, one budget, and one reporting system, and bringing together the Ministry of Water as a chair of the National Steering Committee, but also the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, and Ministry of Finance. And development partners are well represented in the steering committee. We have the steering committee composed of ministers for high-level attention and policy directions, but we have a national high-level technical team who are taking care of the programmatic management responsibilities. And the same is happening down the line into the regional or subnational structures, up to the district level. Most of the time in East Africa, they call it county. So we have the Kabyle level, village level structures. Up into the national level, we have the Federal Steering Committee. And those 4 ministries are members of the Council of Ministers, whereby together they can influence the Council of Ministers to allocate resources. So this time around, Ethiopia has a huge investment financed directly from the treasury sources. And thanks to the World Bank, they came up with a long-term supporting system. We have now finalized the ONE-WaSH phase 3, and the bank has committed, as usual, close to $1.5 billion for the next 15 years. And this strategy is finalized. We have now the ONE-WaSH phase 3. The Ethiopian country program for World Bank has coordinated, and UNICEF, of course, financing the technical assistance cost of developing this strategy. So we are driving forward, but with a lot of challenges. Truly speaking, as I said earlier, Ethiopia is a big country in East Africa next to Nigeria, the second populous country with more than 130 million. And that's why I guess The bank has focused in Ethiopia. Doing in Nigeria and Ethiopia means doing in multiple, African countries. That's the strategic, approach. So the Ministry of Finance is a member of the steering committee who are the budget holders. So through the standing committee around the national parliament, we are influencing our level best to match and to co-finance, not looking for grants and loans, but also for government of Ethiopia to resource the sector so that we will succeed in achieving, our targets, aimed at the SDG 6.1 and 6.2. As I said, the population settlement pattern is one of the very critical challenge, and the increasing urbanization and population itself. Look, the growth rate is, I think, more than 2.5, and our progress is very slow. While we are exerting our maximum effort to address the WaSH needs of, marginalized communities in the rural areas, both in rural and urban, but the population increment is still coming again while we are, working. The non-functionality issue is another issue. Sustainability is a very critical issue for us. Sustainability of, the schemes. While we are focusing on construction of new schemes, the issue of sustaining the existing, schemes to provide service for designed period is another issue. So we are currently working to have a kind of MIS, having a reliable, sound, reliable MIS system is something very, very basic. And that's part of our accountability. Our accountability to the donors, our accountability to the users, and our accountability to the system and to the sector. We have thousands of NGOs working in Ethiopia, close to, 8,000 NGOs working in different sectors. And WaSH is the second. And we have multiple of NGOs working in the WaSH sector in this room, attending this session. But still, the contribution of CSOs should be properly reported and recognized by government. And in many of the African countries, the contribution of NGOs is not well coordinated and integrated, and is not reported and also recognized. And that is one of the key areas that the sector is currently working with. And as of the coming new year, 2026, we will have a very well-streamed NGO coordination within the ONE-WaSH, so that the contribution of all stakeholders, be it private or NGO or government or donors of financial projects, will be streamed into the ONE-WaSH program, so that we will be reporting to, as a contribution to the GMP reporting system. We had a session yesterday with GMP team, and one of the very critical issues is the data. Data is very fundamentally important. Data is a resource, and that's how the donors are challenging us, and that is something we are missing. Of course, it's not a neglect agenda, but we have been trying, to do that. Back in 2018, we had the ONE-WaSH National Inventory, and we conducted the whole scheme, all schemes across the country, in rural and urban. We came up with a very successful data collection processes, but it's unfortunate that we are not able to come up with an analytical report. And the report is generated after 5 years, and that's a failure. And we learned a lot from our fail. And it's not a success. It's only, we are learning from our failures and our challenges. So this time around, we are working aggressively under the leadership and the chairmanship of our minister. We are working on the MI system for us to have a reliable data sources, so that any stakeholder can have access into that data portal system within the ministry, a centralized, MI system to be reported and to be used as a resource for securing additional resources. More than 50 million. A minimum of 50 million people are still lacking access to clean water. 34 to 40% of the national population do not have access to clean sanitation and safe sanitation facilities. And with all these challenges, we are still working aggressively. As we promised as a government, we are working our level best and to coordinate all the stakeholders who are working in the WaSH sector, so that we will be able to keep our promises and keep the momentum and deliver our commitments, nationally and internationally. Thank you very much. Any questions, clarifications, I'm most welcome to respond. And my colleagues are here around with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Abarra, for your insightful speech. Just to summarize to key points, you see, ONE-WaSH National Program has been in a phase-based revision. Recently, the phase 3 is discussed in all sectors, NGOs, government, and donors, and incorporated any updated issues that Abarra was saying, and we have finalized the third version. And one important thing is in designing the program, there is a funding gap. So what Atabarra was mentioning, we have designed a financing strategy as part of solution to fill the gap in finance, which enables to leverage local resources. You see, I can give you an example, the non-revenue water is very high. If you take Addis, around 40-something% is non-revenue water. If a utility, an intervention working in non-revenue water, there is a lot of money to be saved that can be used for operation and maintenance and further for investment. One important thing, as we WaSH experienced guys in the sector in the country, the water policy was an old water policy which have been in the sector for some time, and we have been advocating the engagement of the private sector. You see, the private sector has been working on this drilling, construction activities, and selling some spare part to the intervention. Now, the policy allows the full engagement of the private sector. We really are proud of that, and the government is very committed and open, and there is a good enabling environment for now for the private sector to engage. What is remaining and what we are learning is a baby to walk before it runs, or he runs, or she runs. So this is a new experience. Which PPP model is really feasible to our context is the question. We are learning from different countries so that guidelines and manuals will be developed so that the private sector can fully engage in water sector in Ethiopia. So they can, if any private sector willing and able to invest in the water sector in Ethiopia these days, it is most welcome and invest. So with that brief summary, I open the floor for you to raise some question, comments, reflection. Quick one, please. No, you raised the first one. Yeah, whichever convenient for you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Congratulations. Until a few months ago, I was the global lead for water supply and sanitation at the World Bank. So I happen to know the ONE-WaSH program very well. And I wanted to congratulate you. As you were saying, it's a unique program. The efforts of the government of Ethiopia to bring together the different donors and multilateral banks under a single framework and with common objectives is really commendable. The progress you have made also in implementing the different phases of the program is also commendable. And since you were referring to sustainability, I would like to ask you, what is the vision of the government and the ministry in terms of the long-term sustainability of the infrastructure that has been financed by the program? I mean, it's clear, Ethiopia and many other countries in Africa, almost all of them, do need significant investments in infrastructure to move towards SDG 6.1 and 6.2. However, the challenge in most of the African countries, with some exceptions only, is the lack of strong service providers. Service providers that can attract financing. When the financing from the international community, IFIs, multilateral development banks, bilaterals, which, as you know, we heard yesterday in the plenary, is decreasing. So as donor resources start going down, what is the vision of the government to attract other sources of financing, including from the private sector? What is your vision regarding the constitution of strong utilities? Strong utilities that will be able to operate the infrastructure that you have built over the last 10 years and collect revenues from those services, revenues that will eventually replace the subsidies you are getting from the international, and loans, of course, from the international community. I would like to ask you if you can comment on that, on the establishment of solid utilities in the country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Two questions. One is in terms of sustainability. Recently, what we initiated some 2 years before, of course, for the urban settings, we have what we call it the urban utility regulatory framework. And because, we have thousands of towns and cities in Ethiopia with utilities and having board management system, and that is supposed to function properly, but it's unfortunate that the issues related to accountability of the board managing the utility, overseeing the utility, and the utility management members, being accountable for proper service delivery, and the staffs down into the user communities. That has been one of the very critical missing link in the sector in Ethiopia. So recently, we added the rural water supply regulatory framework into the urban. So we are working it together. So we had never had any regulatory authority for the water sector in Ethiopia. That is one of the very critical challenges we had it. And it's a ministry who is a policymaker and who is a service provider and also regulating itself. This is totally wrong. This is totally wrong. So in this case, currently we are working on, coalition or bringing together the urban utility regulatory framework as well as the rural water supply regulatory framework. So we are working together with Hilton Foundation, and I had the chance to talk to your team in Ethiopia, and Gulilat have been in attendance of that training workshop. We had 3 days of intensive, training workshop on rural water supply regulatory framework organized by Aqua Consult and ISWAS in East Africa. So we are working with them to come up with a solution so that we will be able to have a regulatory authority as well as a regulatory strategy and roadmap to be endorsed, to regulate the service delivery and to account each of the service providers. Yes, we have some service providers in the rural. Many of the NGOs in Ethiopia do have an excellent exercise of small, showcases here and there in different corners of the country. They have their own small service providers who are taking care of, the service delivery and management at Warada level, at district level. And they are really charging a fair price for any of the operational maintenance services. That's focusing more on post-construction support system. We have a desk, a department within the ministry, fully responsible for operation and maintenance aspect. And we are not to do the operation maintenance, rather as a ministry to make sure that that structure and institutional setup is, embedded in the respective district water offices or Warada water offices, regional water bureaus, so that they will have dedicated human power to focus and to make sure that service delivery and provision of service delivery will not be interrupted because of the lack of supply chain management and other maintenance issues. With regard to additional financing, of course, yes, Ethiopia, as compared to other African countries like including Kenya or Tanzania or Rwanda or Uganda, we are not a good country, truly speaking, especially in terms of attracting private sector investment in the water sector. But nowadays, a good showcase is, for example, Aqua for All, based in The Hague. They are coming up with a good proposal and bringing up private banks, not only the MFIs, just the private banks. They have just some years before, the Aqua for All has already signed an agreement with Buna Bank. Buna Bank is one of the largest private bank in Ethiopia, and Sinke Bank, nearly 2-3 private banks have already signed an agreement to extend and to provide loans for utilities so that they can do extension and expansion of the water sector, so that is repayable type of loan financing systems for the private sector to come in, as a business model for the WaSH sector. One of the very critical challenges we have been facing for decades is the accountability for utilities and the loan they have taken already decades and years before was not paid back. And that is a very critical challenge within our ministry. And His Excellency the Minister has already been challenging the respective individual regional presidents to be responsible for the payback. We have billions and millions of loans which is already injected into many of hundreds of utilities. And they have already invested that resource and they are not paying back. And this time we are becoming very aggressive and politicizing this issue to the attention of the regional presidents. Now they are paying back, truly speaking. The Water Resource Development Fund within the ministry, that's an institution under the line management of His Excellency Ambassador Asfaw, the WaSH subsector, they are now paying back. So that resource which is paid back from the utilities is released into the awaiting, cities and towns in, medium, small, and big towns across Ethiopia. So that is how we are trying to attract additional financing. And as Tamana said, we have a department in the Ministry of Finance. We call it, a Directorate for Public-Private Partnership Department in the Ministry of Finance. So private sectors are now coming in. We are creating a kind of window of opportunities for private sector, investment availabilities, for them to develop, manage, and supply water. But the ministry to regulate as a policy maker, not to control everything, not to provide service, rather to focus more on regulatory roles. The other point which we have recently initiated is the Smart Village program, jointly with UNICEF. The smart cities means a kind of total transformation of cities through WaSH. And we have healthcare facilities, we have school children, we have communities living around. So we are piloting these smart cities to have all the infrastructure and all other sectors working with us, and to focus on small pilot exercise level and having the learning outcome properly documented from that exercise. We are going to scale it at large in many of the other areas. So the smart cities approach is something that we have currently initiated it, and many of the stakeholders are happily joining us to support that initiative. And under the Ministry of Water and Energy and Ministry of Health, we are working towards to have total transformation of, village, like we did it, we saw it, the learning, the plenary session, we saw it in India, in the rural village. That is how we are contextualizing and localizing that approach into Ethiopia for us to have a kind of smart village, so that they will have, clean water, safe sanitation and safe hygiene, service delivery program.
Your question? Okay, thank you. Okay. Any other question, please? Then followed by Betty.
Thank you so much for some of those insights. So looking into ONE-WaSH, I believe that this involves quite a number of...
You from where?
Yes, this is Emmanuel from Milina Motaland, Kenya.
Kenya, perfect.
So my question is regards to the MIS system that you talked about. And looking into ONE-WaSH, then that means you're looking into the environment sector, you're looking into combination of WaSH for schools, which brings education, among other sectors that are within the ONE-WaSH approach. So my question is with the MIS, and we've seen that challenges with the MIS comes with fragmented data warehouses, and where you don't have, there's a mismatch between some of the APIs that comes on board with different dashboards and all that. So I'm curious how you are looking into the MIS platform with regards to having all these other sectors integrated into one platform, probably maybe using APIs and all that. And we've seen that data fragmentation is usually an issue when it comes to MIS. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I think, yeah, that's absolutely true. And in Ethiopia, in the case of the Ministry of Health, for example, they do have what they call it the Health Management Information System. That's the HMIS. The Ministry of Education, they do have Education Management Information System, AMIS they call it. And it's unfortunate, we have been struggling a lot because of the complexity of the sector by itself. The Ministry of Water and Energy was still struggling to have how we could at least capture the key KPIs, globally accepted and agreeable, reportable KPIs in the WaSH sector. So the health and education do have their own MIS with all the limitations in it. And currently, in the Ministry of Water and Energy, what we did, I myself as member of the committee, had the infrastructure already. We have the servers, we have the interactive TV screens, all the servers and all the required facilities and infrastructure for the MI system. Now we have the hive. For us to be able to make the honey, we are getting prepared to have survey tools and technologies about how we should conduct the data collection for WaSH, at least for water sector. When we say WaSH, it's talking about sanitation and hygiene. You see how complex it is. So we will be focusing on the water MIS first. The water MIS was in rural urban setting with all key critically accepted KPIs, and that is under process. And we will be doing it. As I said earlier, back in 2011, we had a paper-based national WaSH inventory. And that is reported excellently. We had the publication in it. Back in 2011, I said, some 14 years before. 2018, we had, tablet-based data collection system. And with a support from the previous DFID and the current FCDO and the African Development Bank, we had an excellent data collection process. We used it. I used to be, seconded to the ministry as a staff of the coffee, the Tete company based in UK, London. We used a survey tool called Cosmos, and that Cosmos is very friendly, and the data collection was managed by respective Warada Water Office staffs, just the sector staffs in the respective Waradas. So it was successfully collected, and because of issues related to server issues embedded on-premise servers, we stored it in the cloud server, freely hosted by Coffee as a Tete company. And that was downloaded with a simple Excel sheet format. And unfortunately, when we come into the analysis, we piloted it in two small regions called Harar and Redoa, two of the regions in Ethiopia. And we came up with an analytical report, and we presented it. You know what happened? When it was presented, the report and the coverage has gone down. Why? Because we have been using administrative data, and we have been lying. I should be bold enough to say this. We were lying, and because we are reporting based on administrative data. And when we presented it to the ministers, what? And unacceptable. And what was made is that was circulated to the respective regional water bureaus. Guys, this is the report. And we sent them out. And they said, no, we are in disagreement with you, they said. Why? This is not our coverage. Because they have been reporting to the regional council. So contradicting. So this is a challenge we have been in. So to avoid this, still, we will be focusing on, tablet-based, protected and safe data collection system. It's not a paper-based. It's going to be paperless, tablet-based. We will be using, tablets like this one, and then we will be using them. And once we successfully manage the data collection, the national WaSH inventory, we will be able to do it on annual basis for the newly constructed schemes and for any of rehabilitations and operation maintenance schemes to be embedded into, a time to have a time series data on annual basis. So that's how we are going to do it. So what's lacking is only for the Ministry of Water. The Ministry of Health and Education do have their own MIS already. So we will make a kind of integration of the three MIS together, because we have the steering committee composed of ministers, we have policy makers, we have decision makers, we have ministers, top government officials. They will give us their blessings, and the technical team will drive it from there. That's how we are going to do it. I know it's a full of challenges, but this is something that we should do it. Otherwise, we will remain in a continuous vicious circle of challenges in the sector. I don't know in case if I have addressed your question.
It's okay? Okay, Betty, you have been raising it. You want the mic to come to you, or you come to the mic?
Thank you, Abarra, for that really engaging presentation and share about the ONE-WaSH National Program. I think it's fair to underscore, let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Bethlehem. I'm the Global Coordinator of Agenda for Change. And I've worked on the various renditions of the ONE-WaSH National Program. And I must say, it's an excellent example of state-led integration. And I think it also highlights that when a state is well organized, it enables non-state actors to also effectively align. So I think that's a really important point to underscore. So at Agenda for Change, we're trying to facilitate sharing and learning of the ONE-WaSH National Program to be scaled in Malawi, and also inform the currently establishing ONE-WaSH National Program in Nigeria. So one of the key things that is important to share, and also links to my observation, is a lot of the ONE-WaSH program is banking on national policies effectively translating at local government level. So for Ethiopia's case, it's our waradas and our districts. So what advice would you have for countries that are as big as Ethiopia and that are looking to scale a similar ambition to the ONE-WaSH national program, for example, Nigeria. What are some of the key tips and recommendations you would have for central government enabling local government to be able to cascade and implement a national ambition and translate it into services at local level?
Yeah, thank you very much, Betty. I think, yeah, that's true. We have hosted many of the African countries coming to Ethiopia to learn about the ONE-WaSH national program, including Eritrea, Uganda, many, Tanzania, Kenya even. They have been with us to learn about how does really the central government was able to bring up all the resources to be channeled into one basket system. It's out of mind, hard. You know why? The reason behind different sources, different donors, different policies, different prerequisitions. But so long as those donors are there in Ethiopia to really help the unserved and marginalized poor communities in Ethiopia, they need to accept what the government is saying. Jen yesterday has been mentioning a lot, for development partners, CSOs, many of the stakeholders, just to listen to what government is saying. And it's good to advise very smartly, wisely. So Ethiopia is a federal system. Ethiopia is a federal system, and then regions do have their own autonomy. And regions are autonomous to decide on their own resources at regional boundaries. We have the federal government. The federal government do have its own responsibilities and authority, and the regional government do have their own authorities and autonomy. So based on the federal system, if we go to Malawi or Nigeria or Rwanda or Uganda, they can adopt it really. They can adopt it in their own context. In a way, what matters for us is the key takeaway, the key message for us is to make sure that the central government, especially with a focus on the line ministries, need to agree on the basics. It's not, the Ministry of Finance to have its own WaSH program, to have their own donors, and the Ministry of Education to have their own donors and competing for resources and pooling and pushing here and there. No! We all are there as a central government, as a federal government. We are there to serve both, institutions and host communities. So the more we do for the communities, we will also be addressing the WaSH needs of institutions, not only healthcare facilities and schools. We have development agents of the agricultural sector. We have Kabale managers. We have multiple of government institutions at village and Kabale level, at county level, in the case of most of East African countries. So I think they can adopt it accordingly, but what matters, the very critical basic message is for the central line ministries to agree and to look into how the institutional setup is made. In our case, we have the Ministry of Water and Energy. Earlier, before, it has been called as Ministry of Water, Irrigation and Energy. Now, the Ministry of Irrigation has already gone, and named as Ministry of Irrigation and Lowland Development. But any issue related to water is dealt within our ministry. Be it for irrigation, be it for domestic consumption, be it for cattle trough, be it for construction or industry or any other consumption. Issues related to water is dealt within the Ministry of Water. Issues related to energy, be it for solarization or application of technologies in terms of any other energy sources, renewable energy technologies, it's to be dealt within the Ministry of Water and Energy. So we are lucky to have these two ministries together in one ministry. And we are the ones who are leading. So the Ministry of Health and Education are with us. So agreeing priorly at federal level, at the central government level, is something that we need to make sure that there is a mutual understanding of the line sectors, the line ministries. That's very fundamental. So long as they agree with this, so long as the government has already had its own clear roadmap for all stakeholders to have their own playground, fertile playground, that's good. And NGOs are criticizing us a lot, and they are correct. You see, we don't have any unit to coordinate CSOs. They came up with their own project proposal, agreements, reports, and they don't know where they are going to report to. And there is no any dedicated unit within the ministry. This time, we have a coordination platform. We had a good exercise with them. We had 2-3 times of high-level, intensive, consultative workshops with all CSOs together. And we agreed. And many of NGOs are now coming with their own resource. We don't need the resource to be channeled into the basket funding system. We have what we call it consolidated WaSH account. Consolidated WaSH account is a one basket funding system. And World Bank, African Development Bank, UNICEF, FCDO, COICA, money, the Finnish, all the donors are channeling their resource into that consolidated WaSH account. And government is responsible. And the Ministry of Finance is responsible for managing the budget and matching the budget, matching from the public finance. And so long as we did this, we are no, incoming, bilaterals and multilaterals coming into the ONE-WaSH to join. So that way we will avoid one, duplication of effort, we value for money, and we keep the equity issues. Equities. We avoid duplication of efforts. If you go to some of the waradas in Ethiopia, for example, you will have tens of NGOs working in that area because the environment is very well enjoyable, the natural beauty, the ups and downs, very important. In the other side of Ethiopia, you will never heard of any single NGO, I tell you. That's the reality. And we conducted as a ministry a national assessment of the NGOs, mapping exercise. We came up with this reality and evidence on the ground, and we tabled it for their decision. And we discussed and we agreed that NGOs should be properly coordinated, supported, backed up by the government. For any of the project inputs they are importing from abroad, so long as it's for WaSH, the rest of water and energy should facilitate for the duty exemption, so that investment will add value into additional access for WaSH for the unserved communities in the rural Ethiopia. That's the way how we are doing. So I think the institutional setup and the consensus to be built at the federal line ministries is something that other countries should take into account. They need to first agree and came up with the big donors, including the World Bank. And thanks to World Bank, they have been with us and taking the lion's share of financing the sector. Still, they are with us and backupping us. And the government has to sit on the driver's seat to take us somewhere where we should, arrive. Back in, we left with 5 years for SDG. And we don't know how long we are going to be closer to SDG reporting and how many of the African countries will be achieving the SDG targets of 6.1 and 6.2. That's a challenge. So that is the way how we advise them to have the institutional setup to build up consensus between the government line ministries. That is something to be done, at the first point. So that I think they can localize it and then adopt it in their own national contexts, be it Republican type of structure or democratic type of structure or any other government political setup.
We civil society also acknowledge the support being given by the ministry, because Abarra every time responding quickly, asking any question and support we have, so we also acknowledge from our side. Any please? Oh, 1, 2, 3.
I don't know, I wonder if you could just provide a little bit more detail on how the government is supporting private sector investment, and also, where are there particular places in the federal budget where you're saying there is opportunity to mobilize national resources? Just curious about those.
Yeah. The private sectors in Ethiopia, in the WaSH sector, have been engaged, mainly almost on the drilling aspect. You see, they came up with their own drilling rigs and compressors. They fully engaged in the drilling aspect and competing for bids and contracts at federal or regional level or at district level. They focus on the drilling aspect. But what was very fundamental for us is Ethiopia do really need $10 billion every year for us to be able to address the WaSH need before the SDG reporting. You see, the funding gap, very huge, billions. So in this case, that's why, the Council of Ministers, and especially under the facilitation of the National WaSH Steering Committee, chaired by the Minister of Water and Energy, His Excellency the Minister himself, they have tabled this to the attention of the Minister of Finance. And they created a dedicated department of, they call it public-private partnership. And any of the potential project proposals developed by any of the sectors, including the Ministry of Water and Energy, will be presented to the Ministry of Finance. They will review it, against the PPP policy we have it. We have the policy, we have the regulatory framework for PPP approach, including for the WaSH sector. So based on that, any of potential private sectors can come in and invest to be engaged in service provision and development of water supply systems, be it for domestic consumption or industries or any of the development programs in Ethiopia. So that is where we are currently working in. So as I said, the focus has been on drilling aspect, but still even the private sectors in the drilling aspect, they are becoming very weak. The technology they have it is very old technology, very old fashioned. And I have a project which is financed by the Children Investment Fund Foundation. I myself is managing. And CIF, a UK-based private philanthropy, has already provided us 8 drilling rigs. Look, 8 drilling rigs. And the founder and the board chair, His Excellency, Sir Chris Holmes, have been in Ethiopia just during the African Climate Summit some months before, and he had a chance to speak to the WaSH ministers. And we took him to the rural Ethiopia, where the project is financed by CIF. He visited. And CIF is financing for water supply, and government is discharging the sanitation responsibilities. We are supposed to construct sanitation facilities in the healthcare facilities and school communities. And CIF is providing for the larger share, the water supply infrastructure. They did it. We did it together. And Chris was very much happy. And you know what he said to the ministers? How many rigs do you need, minister? And now, just a week before, I myself, on behalf of His Excellency the Minister, has sent a letter of confirmation. CIF is going to, provide us additional 10 drilling rigs to the ministry, and with a total of 18. Look, a single private philanthropy, and we need a lot of drilling rigs in Ethiopia. And nowadays, as a result of the groundwater depletion and the climate change effect, earlier before we were able to secure water at a very shallow ground level. And this time, you need to drill it deeper and deeper. That's the challenge we have it. And the per capita investment, booming, heading up, and raising them the attention and the interest. So that's the challenge we have it. But government is working towards a kind of villagization program. And the Green Legacy program, we have been doing it for the last 6 years, nearly 7 years. We have successfully planted close to 48 billion seedlings in Ethiopia. 48 billions. I tell you, close to 75 to 80% of growing probabilities, including the fruit trees. This will definitely have their own contribution into groundwater recharging and protecting siltations into rivers and water bodies. So this is what we are doing, but for the private sector, we are working together under the coordination of the Ministry of Finance. We have many more projects, opportunities, and window of opportunities for private sector to come in. As I said, the banks, the private banks in Ethiopia are now lending, available credit facilities for the utilities or any of the private sector. And WaSH is now becoming a window of opportunities for making business. But the ministries need to make sure that, as I said earlier, water is both social good and economic good. And that has to be maintained very carefully. Citizens do have the right to have access, also the obligation to pay as the users pay principle and thought. So that's how we are trying to do it.
Thank you very much for the presentation and all the opportunity to dialogue. My name is Adrian. I'm with Water for Good. And I was wondering, building a bit on the previous question about opportunities to direct subsidy and support operation and maintenance. Have you talked about the opportunity to use results-based funding or other mechanisms to attract private operators and direct subsidy for private operations and maintenance through results-based funding or other mechanisms? Any feedback or experience with that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I met you yesterday, and then we had this very great things. Water for Good was earlier called as Life Water International. They have changed their name very recently. I think in Ethiopia it was not yet officially reported to us. I have been, speaking to your colleague. They are going to be renamed as Water for Good. And I had the chance to visit many of the projects they are implementing around Ethiopia. I'm taking care of all the NGOs working in Ethiopia in the WaSH sector and then supervising many of the projects. And they had an excellent exercise, bringing up private, service providers at district level. And those private, service providers are taking care of the operation and maintenance. They they are regulated by the Warada water offices. They are under the Warada water offices, but line managed by the Warada water office, but those private service providers are established by Water for Good, and they have their own office, their own facilities, their own, maintenance tools, well furnished, well equipped, trained experts, including the water quality monitoring. And I should, extend my sincere appreciations for what, Water for Good is doing in the rural Ethiopia, in Bensa, and many of the 3 waradas I visited, I remember, with your team. So I think those are small-scale, low-level showcases, so that a kind of subsidies need to come up with. And the problem with us is how serious the Warada water offices are to properly and regularly monitor and supervise this team. So that we will institutionalize it. So that Warada water office, instead of, a kind of managing crisis, a given Warada could have hundreds of water schemes and multiple of 50 to 60 kabalis in one Warada. And they don't have a single motorbike even to travel. I tell you. They don't have a single motorbike, but they are supposed to manage hundreds of water schemes. And we should be joking if we decide to continue this way. And our intention is strongly encouraging to have private sector operators to come in. And this time around, technologies are now becoming very complex. And multiple villages, RPS systems, motorized systems, the solar systems, complicated systems, the schemes, the water schemes, from the source to the point of collection is going to be very complex, very distant, in kilometers, and many more infrastructures coming in. And this is not something that we will manage it based on voluntary WaSH committees. We need to have private operators to come in. Professionalization of the service delivery. Professionalization of the service delivery. WaSHCons are a group of voluntary committees elected democratically by the user communities, and they are just to take care of just the governance. And they don't have the required skill to do the operation maintenance. And that is what we are currently pushing forward with a program initiated by UNICEF and the ministry. We have what we call it the rural public utility modeling. Some years before, we have piloted it. We are now jumping into the rural public utility modeling, not only for the urban, but even for the rural. We are going to have a rural public utility modeling, so that professionalizing the service delivery and ensuring sustainability of the service delivery in the community. In terms of the investment, as I said earlier, we are still trying our level best to have a partnership with private sectors, private developers, to come into the sector, but we need to have the policy. We need to have the policy. The newly revised version of the National Water Policy has a lot of statements in it with window of opportunities for private sector to come in. Earlier, in the old version of the policy, there had been nothing about private sector, nothing. And this time, because the resource is in the hands of the private sector, we are attracting the private sector to come in, not only on the drilling, but also on supplying service delivery. Kenya is a good example. Our colleagues have been traveling a lot in Kenya, in many of your counties, and the private service providers in Kenya is a lot. Ethiopia is not, an exceptional country, so we need to adopt it. And we are not living in an island. We are now in one village. The globe is becoming as one village, and we cannot escape from this reality. And we need to do it by any means, in a way that will not be contradicting with the national policies and the national constitution. Yeah.
Good morning. I'm Christy with Vision Fund International.
Vision Fund?
Yeah.
From World Vision?
Yes, from World Vision.
Yeah, that's World Vision. I know it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. And just want to go back to the finance strategy that you mentioned. I understand that about 10% of your goal was about 10% repayable finance per year on a budget level, and just wanted to know how you're doing in meeting that target of 10%, and then where is that repayable finance being deployed? Where do you see that happening?
Yeah. if I do understand, the question, you said the 10% repayable for any of the credit facilities through, is that the Vision Fund or?
That was how I read your financing strategy, or
Yes.
your WaSH financing strategy.
Yeah.
That there's a goal of 10% per year annual budget. From your annual budget
Yeah.
invested in WaSH, 10% would be from repayable finance, right? From the policy.
Yes.
Yeah, so just wanted to know how well you're meeting that target. How's that going? And where is that repayable finance going?
Okay.
Is that clear?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, Lemisa, please. Yeah, give him the opportunity to respond, please. Yeah. Thank you for your
So we are
assistance,
collaborating in a way.
Lemisa is from a country director
Yeah.
for RC-WaSH in Ethiopia.
Thank you so much, Christine, and your team was part of that strategy development. And the National WaSH Financing Strategy indicates multiple sources of financing and funding WaSH in the coming multiple years. And the potential finance from private is like around 10.5 or 11%, like you said. It includes from users and the private investors. And this investment is mainly focusing on operation and maintenance. It's mainly on post-construction support. Yeah, I can see it. Thank you.
Yeah, plus, usually earlier before,
Yeah, I just want to know where it's, not so much where you expect, but what have you seen until now?
Okay, the progress so far.
exactly. I think that aspect of, that part of the component as a, the broader WaSH concept in the National WaSH program is not yet, properly and grounded yet. But this time around, because of the reason that there is a very competitive needs and millions of people being remained unserved in the WaSH sector, we are strongly encouraging for community ownership and belongingness for any single coin of investment going into their own respective village to be properly managed. So as part of creating sense of ownership and accountability, we were expecting for communities to have their own share of contributions. And that contribution to ensure sustainability of the schemes is to be managed by their own elected committees. And that's to be used during the time of the operation and maintenance time. Before any investment comes in, they need to secure a reasonable amount of funding for sustainability and operation and maintenance. That part of proportion of contribution into the sector will secure the sustainability. Once we are done with the construction and the handing over of the infrastructure for water supply, be it springs or shallow air or deep well or any other treatment source of water supply system, the community should have their own share of contributions, and that's a prerequisite. We have a program called the ONE-WaSH, financed by Government of Ethiopia and Government of Finland. And the ONE-WaSH, the principle we followed is a kind of need-based approach. It's not the ministry to do everything for the community. Rather, the community has to flag it. They need to come up with their own claims and their request. And that way, the contribution from the community is properly reported, documented, financed, and installed in a bank, either in a bank or in MFIs. So that closed account, properly auditable account, is reported to the sector, for the sector to be able to invest into the WaSH sector. That way is something that we are going to scale it at large. The exercise, we had it in the WaSH financing of significant community contribution is supposed to be a kind of, lever or creating access for road, for machines to come in and to drill. But nowadays, this time, they are really contributing in cash and cash contributions on top of, labor and skill contribution or unskilled labor contribution. They are coming up with their own share of contribution to the WaSH sector so that they will, feel a sense of ownership, so that there will be no damage on the system, on the schemes be it in the source or any of the water points or any of the facilities around. So that is the way how we are doing, but still that's going to happen in the ONE-WaSH phase 3, which we are planning to, start the implementation as of 2026 in January.
You are far from speaker.
Henk Rotslager, Meta Smart Center Group. I have two questions, one on quality for urban and rural systems, and one for quantity in rural systems. So we all know with the aging systems, the aging pipes, the reducing budget, etc., the water quality is a huge challenge. Maybe only 10% of the utilities in Ethiopia can guarantee that the water is always safe 24/7. Maybe more, maybe less, but around that number maybe. So I understand that some of your utilities now promote household water treatment, because if people have to store water, if you have water sharing and you have to store water, you need to treat it at the point of use. So I understand you have about 50 or 60 utilities already that promote household water treatment, especially filters. So can you explain a bit more about that? The next one is water quantity. The big challenge is rural areas. 80% live in rural areas. And I have the opportunity to read your ONE-WaSH 3 policy for the next 5 years. And I've read over 50 times the word self-supply. So I was curious, what do you mean with self-supply? How do you see that people are co-funding their own systems? Thank you.
Yes. Lemesa? Yeah, please. Give him a chance to respond. And I will add, yeah.
Thank you, Abarra. Let me support Abarra in this direction, because we are engaged nationally in different platforms on self-supply and also household water treatment and safe storage. Having a piped water supply doesn't really guarantee water quality. Sometimes we have old pipe systems, breakage, or sometimes like lack of disinfection at source or at reservoir stage, and so on. So water can be polluted or contaminated at any point before reaching to the consumption level. As usual, we are usually advising water treatment at consumption point or at use point. Like you said, Mr. Henk, it is not a surprise if town water utilities really sell water filter or whatever household water treatment devices at household level. They cannot be 100% sure on the water quality they are supplying to people, sometimes related to skills, sometimes related to chemical treatments, lack of chemical treatments, and most of them are usually also imported. That's number one. On self-supply, since 2011, the country has a national self-supply policy guidelines, and there are layers of category in that guideline. One is group self-supply, which involves 5 to 10 households. If a village is able to bring 5 to 10 households together, they are eligible to subsidy up to 50% for oil industrial products, not for local materials. But if it is at individual household level, they are eligible only for technical advices. Otherwise, any investment, capital investment, needs to be paid by the users. So self-supply has a kind of category from 100% investment from the user up to 50% investment, capital investment from users. So there is a policy guideline which is already acknowledged by government, and our recent national water resource management policy also acknowledges that guideline. Thank you.
Any final question, because we are approaching the time?
Yeah, the challenge related to the self-supply, of course, is the issue of the water quality, and whether or not that is really meets the minimum global standards. minimum qualities and reportable issues. And I remember the discussion we had it with GMP group. For the GMP reporting, we have the National Central Statistics Authority nationally, which quantifies the water quality issues. So long as those self-supply technologies are safe source and regularly monitored in terms of their quality, that is acknowledged, and that is the discussion and the agreement between GMP and Ethiopian group. So that is a quality aspect. But as Lemesa said earlier, in the case of Ethiopia, the moment we secure to have water by any means from any source, the first action that we are going to conduct is the water quality testing. And that's where we start with, the water quality, be it for rural and urban, as you said. So we do the water quality testing, and we came up with analysis. And if that is with some issues, be it in iron or fluoride or any of the water quality aspect, and if that is still available for treatment, we go for the treatment process. Next to that, once we completed the infrastructure, we will be conducting regular water quality monitoring practice. And we should be honest that that is something that we are still in a challenge. Some of the regions are doing it very well, especially in the utility level, but in the urban settings, the expectation is at least for the water reservoirs to be washed on regular basis and to make sure that there is regular disinfection and chlorination. And this time, we have initiated some projects of inline chlorination. But as Lemesa said, I think the water treatment should happen at a point of use. At a point of use, both for rural and urban, because a level of ladders in transporting water from the source to the point of consumption. So the household water treatment and management practice is something that we strongly encourage and have had some practices in many parts of Ethiopia. Thank you very much. I think we are running out of time.
I think we are on time, and we appreciate active participation and joining us in this session. We need also to applaud Mr. Abarra for his active and excellent explanation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
With that, we have finalized, and thank you very much. You have a question?
Yes, I do. Many, as well. I was just wondering, in the framework of this ONE-WaSH project, and also
He's also the coordinator. He's the coordinator of ONE-WaSH. Yeah.